justice, but
Mm.
as far as
But we can't find out.
much
A lot of
about 'em,
stuff.
that's
Yeah.
the part,
Yeah. Just
we
sad.
will, but
Sad.
So
hopefully we
today,
get the truth.
today we're going to talk about the last chapter of Second Kings. We're finishing off Kings today, and we're starting Chronicles. So, and we'll do the first 9 chapters of Chronicles in about 5 minutes. It's all genealogy. So, but we'll.
Assassinations were on quite a bit in the Old Testament.
Yes, they did. Yes, they did. We
The
can't
son
control.
of and the son of and the son of.
We can't control what happens in this world, but we can be godly ourselves and do the right thing ourselves, right? We can control ourselves. So we are in 2 Kings 25, the last chapter of 2 Kings, and we're going to be previewing 1 Chronicles 1 through 9, and we'll get set up for what we're going to do in Chronicles. So as a reminder on our chart, remember that we're on the last king. Zedekiah was the last king in Judah. Israel's been gone for a while. Notice all the prophets speaking. We're going to get into about the middle of 2 Chronicles is when we'll start putting the prophets in, because the written works of the prophets that we have occurred during that the time that they were being taken into captivity and while they were in captivity. There were 70 years that they're in captivity, so it kind of overlaps with Chronicles. So we'll be taking a look at that in more detail, but not yet. First Chronicles. First we get to finish Kings, and then we'll start First Chronicles. Today we'll do the introduction. So I think the first written prophet that we're going to read about will be Obadiah, but that won't be for a while. So, okay, 2 Kings 25 verse 1. So in the 9th year of Zedekiah's reign, on the 10th day of the 10th month, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, marched against Jerusalem with his whole army. Anybody recognize the name Nebuchadnezzar?
Mm-hmm.
Where do you recognize it from?
Last class.
Last class. And do you recognize who?
The chosen.
Who's the other prophet that we have? A book we have. Daniel. There you go. What did you say?
Daniel.
Daniel.
Yeah.
Yes. We did a study on Daniel with the Hopi people, so it's really fresh in my head right now. So it was kind of mind warping for me to recognize that this is what Nebuchadnezzar was doing, and then Daniel was a part of this captivity, and he's then we read about Nebuchadnezzar's interactions with Daniel. So it's kind of interesting to see that overlay. He marched against Jerusalem with his whole army. He encamped outside the city and built siege works all around it. The city was kept under siege until the 11th year of King Zedekiah. So it was the 9th year, and then it's the 11th year. So how long was Jerusalem under siege?
So 2 years.
2 years. Does that seem long? Well, let's pretend that you have to stay at your house. You can't leave your house. Nothing can go out of your house. Nothing can come into your house. And you're there for 2 years.
Long time. What do you eat?
Your dog? I don't know. What do you eat? You would get desperate, right?
Right.
You would eat everything in the house. You'd begin to, miserly give it out, right? And be careful with it. But yeah, what do you eat?
Look how crazy people went during COVID, and they had TVs and phones and.
How many of you could even have enough water?
Yeah.
No.
I've been thinking that's one of the biggest limitations we have now, because few of us have our own wells, and we plan on water supply from the public utilities. I have some comfort knowing the farmers in this region have their own water district, because I feel like the farmer's going to make sure the water keeps flowing, whereas other cities or towns, who knows what they might do. But yeah, if you think about it, this is 2 years in your city. You can't go out. So first you eat everything you've got, and then what do? You start eating what other people have. You start fighting over what's there. It gets really desperate. This is a desperate situation. By the 9th day of the 4th month, the famine in the city had become so severe that there was no food for the people to eat. Then the city wall was broken through, and the whole army fled at night through the gate between the 2 walls near the king's garden. Though the Babylonians were surrounding the city, they fled toward Arabah, but the Babylonian army pursued the king and overtook him in the plains of Jericho. All his soldiers were separated from him and scattered. and he was captured. He was taken to the king of Babylon at Riblah, where sentence was pronounced on him. They killed the sons of Zedekiah before his eyes. Then they put out his eyes, bound him with bronze shackles, and took him to Babylon. Guess what? Back in Ezekiel and Zedekiah, he was given a prophecy by both, not Zedekiah, Jeremiah. In Ezekiel and Jeremiah, he was told what to do, and he didn't do it. First of all, he was told that this was going to happen. So you would think once he saw this happening, he'd have 2 years to remember what he was told to do about it.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't do either one. Let me read you the prophecy. In Ezekiel 12:13, I will spread my net for him, and he will be caught in my snare. I will bring him to Babylonia, the land of the Chaldeans, but he will not see it, and there he will die. There's the prophecy. In Jeremiah 38:17, then Jeremiah said to Zedekiah, this is what the Lord God Almighty, the God of Israel, says. If you surrender to the officers of the king of Babylon, your life will be spared and the city will not be burned down. You and your family will live. But if you will not surrender to the officers of the king of Babylon, this city will be given into the hands of the Babylonians, and they will burn it down. You yourself will not escape from them. He was given that message beforehand, that what to do. If he would surrender, they didn't have to go through the 2 years, right? Who is making all of this happen? Nebuchadnezzar? No. The only reason Nebuchadnezzar can do this is because God is allowing it, because God told him he was going to bring judgment on him. And God even told Zedekiah how to handle this, because he's going to go down, because God already said, you're going down. He even told him who's going to do it. And so he could have responded by being compliant with at least what God had told him, and they would not have been killed. They would have been taken into captivity, which was what God's intention was. Notice in the verse 7, it says, they put out his eyes. Back in Ezekiel, it said,
You'll not see.
you will not see it, but he will not see it, and there he will die. So those were all prophesied events. He was told ahead of time what to do. Now, are we told ahead of time what to do? Do we have instruction about what to do?
Yeah.
We have instructions about the end times events, different things. We have instruction on what to do. When we choose not to do it, isn't it funny how surprised we are at the consequences? Like, oh gee, look what happened. This
Oh, you
didn't
meant
work out
that?
good.
No.
Yeah, it's not, I guess what I'm saying is he's not unlike we are. Sometimes we're told what to do, and then we're surprised that things turn out the way they did. Verse 8, on the 7th day of the 5th month, in the 19th year of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, by the way, that's August 14th, 586 BC, in case you're interested. Nebuzaradan. Okay, this is going to be hard, because you've got Nebuchadnezzar, who's the king, and you've got Nebuzaradan, who's the commander of the imperial guard. An official of the king of Babylon came to Jerusalem. He set fire to the temple of the Lord, the royal palace, and all the houses of Jerusalem. Every important building he burned down. The whole Babylonian army, under the commander of the imperial guard, broke down the walls around Jerusalem. Nebuzaradan, the commander of the guard, carried into exile the people who remained in the city, along with the rest of the populace and those who had deserted to the king of Babylon. But the commander left behind some of the poorest people of the land to work the vineyards and fields.
I know I've asked this before, but that had to have been years ago. Why do we talk about the Chaldeans and the Babylonians in the same? Are they the same?
Yes, they want Babylon. It took a hold of the Chaldeans, so it's the same area, same region, and they're all under the Babylonian rule right now.
Okay.
That's what I remember. Is that what you remember?
Pretty much Iraq.
Yeah. Yes.
Iraq.
Yeah. Yeah, that area.
Yeah.
Okay. Verse 13, the Babylonians broke up the bronze pillars, the movable stands, and the bronze sea that were at the temple of the Lord, and they carried the bronze to Babylon. They also took away the pots, shovels, wick trimmers, dishes, and all the bronze articles used in the temple service. The commander of the imperial guard took away the censers and the sprinkling bowls, all that were made of pure gold or silver, the bronze from the 2 pillars, the sea, and the movable stands which Solomon had made for the temple of the Lord was more than could be weighed. Each pillar was 18 cubits high. The bronze capital on top of one pillar was 3 cubits high. It was decorated with a network of pomegranates of bronze all around. The other pillar with its network was similar. The commander of the guard took as prisoners Sarai the chief priest, Zephaniah the priest next in rank, and the 3 doorkeepers. Of those still in the city, he took the officer in charge of the fighting men and 5 royal advisors. He also took the secretary, who was chief officer in charge of conscripting the people of the land, and 60 of the conscripts who were found in the city. Nebuzaradan, the commander, took them all and brought them to the king of Babylon at Riblah. There at Riblah, in the land of Hamath, the king had them executed. So Judah went into captivity away from her land. Judah's exile from Canaan was the fulfilled prediction that was given through the prophets because of their covenant curses. In Leviticus 26, Deuteronomy 28, Jeremiah 25, being exiled from the land is a covenant curse. If you refuse to obey me, if you refuse to do what I've said, you will be taken out of the land. So that is what's happening now. They're being taken out. Verse 22, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, appointed Gedaliah, son of Acham, the son of Shaphan, to be over the people he had left behind in Judah. So those would be the poorest people, right, that were left. When all the army officers and their men heard that the king of Babylon had appointed Gedaliah as governor, they came to Gedaliah at Mizpah. Ishmael, son of Nethaniah, Johanan, son of Kara, Sarai, son of Tanhumeth, the Netphathite, Jazaniah, the son of Machithite, and their men. Gedaliah took an oath to reassure them and their men. Do not be afraid of the Babylonian officials, he said. Settle down in the land and serve the king of Babylon, and it will go well with you. In the 7th month, however, Ishmael, son of Nethaniah, the son of Ishmamah, who was of royal blood, came with 10 men and assassinated Gedaliah, and also the men of Judah and the Babylonians who were with him at Mizpah. At this, all the people, from the least to the greatest, together with the army officers, fled to Egypt for fear of the Babylonians. So the Babylonian leader said, look, if you guys will just cooperate and do what we're doing, you'll be fine. We'll just go through this. But instead, they do a little revolt. These guys do a little revolt and kill that guy. So now everyone's afraid that the Babylonians are going to come and say, you wouldn't listen to our commander, so boom, we're going to get rid of you. So they fled to Egypt, which is south, right? Why Egypt? Because Egypt wasn't taken by the Babylonians yet. Maybe they can find some sort of place there to be able to hide, basically. In the 37th year of the exile of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, in the year Awel-Marduk became king of Babylon, he released Jehoiakim, king of Judah, from prison. He did this on the 27th day of the 12th month. He spoke kindly to him and gave him a seat of honor higher than those of the other kings who were with him in Babylon. So Jehoiakim put aside his prison clothes and for the rest of his life ate regularly at the king's table. Day by day, the king gave Jehoiakim a regular allowance as long as he lived. So this was March 22nd, 561 BC. The Babylonian administrative tablets that record the payment of rations of oil and barley to prisoners held in Babylon mention Jehoiakim, king of Judah. So we have some outside evidence of this thing going on, and 5 of his sons. And no reason is given for Jehoiakim's release. Perhaps it was part of a general amnesty proclaimed at the end of Marduk's reign. The book of Kings ends with a hopeful note. The judgment of exile will not destroy the people of Israel or the line of David. God's promise concerning David's house remains. That was in 2 Samuel 7 that we read the promise. So we know that they're going to remain, but we end Kings with them being all exiled. How long will they be exiled? We know. 70 years. Prophesied by, do you remember who prophesied it? Jeremiah, and Daniel read it.
Daniel read
And Daniel brought it up because Daniel gets taken, and however old he was, young man, and 66 years later, he's reading Jeremiah's prophecy and going, wait, it's been almost 70 years now. And that's kind of the interesting connection between the prophets and the scripture. So we're done with 2 Kings. So in 2 Kings, this part here, look at this timeline. We have Saul's reign. See that little blue dot that shows Saul's reign from 1050 to 1010? And then we have David's reign, and then Solomon's reign. And then during Solomon's reign, sees the building of the temple. And then towards the end of Solomon's reign is the division of the kingdom. The Israel and Judah were separated, and God appointed Jeroboam, right, for the northern kingdom as king. And then look how much time passes before the exile. From 930 BC, the dividing of the kingdom, to the exile of Israel was 722. So you've got 7, 8, 9,
About 200.
About 200 years between when the kingdom was divided and Israel falls. But then you've got another couple hundred for the fall of Jerusalem. So Israel fell first, and then we had about an equal amount of time until Jerusalem fell. So these are hundreds of years between here. So they've had all this time to do it right, and they messed it up. Out of all the kings that we saw, 20 or so kings, 20 or so kings, we had 7. No, we had 40 kings, 19 and 20 in the 2 kingdoms. So 40 kings altogether. And out of all those, there were only 7 that were considered that God said were good kings, that did the right thing. So it didn't work well. They didn't rule the kingdom well. It didn't work. Even though he allowed them to split it up, it didn't work well. So then Chronicles is written, and that's where we're going to start next week, is in Chronicles. Chronicles is written to the post-exile Jews. It's written to try to encourage the post-exilic Jews that now that you're coming back 7 years later, now you're coming back in the land, what do they have? Well, first of all, the people who left the land are probably not the same ones coming back. They're probably the kids that have grown up, right? They're old men now. They started out as kids and now they're old men. The older generation would pass away. So they're coming back into a land that's just been raped. There's no cities, no structure, no temples, nothing. So when they come back, they need encouragement. And that's what 1st and 2nd Chronicles is. It's an encouragement to the post-exile Jews that yes, you still can be Jewish, and this is how you do it. So they think the author might be Ezra. I got this from the study Bible notes, from the NIV study Bible notes, the information about to introduce 1st Chronicles. They think that it might have been Ezra. It is written to the people of Judah who've returned from exile in Babylonia, and it's about 450 to 400 BC that we see 1st Chronicles written. The theme, Chronicles encourages post-exilic Israel with an account focusing on God's promises to faithful Davidic kings, especially David and Solomon, that ensures Israel's future. So in Chronicles, he's going to emphasize David and Solomon. In fact, we're not going to get to the end of Solomon until middle of 2nd Chronicles. He's going to really focus on who we were and what God had given us, and focus on that beginning piece so that he can get them back to, the idea is to inspire them to be Jews again, to be Jewish and do what God had told them to do. They're going back into the land. This is their big chance. So the Hebrew title of 1st and 2nd Chronicles can be translated as the events or annals of the days or years. Now we heard that phrase in Kings several times, but there's more than one writing that might be considered the annals. So the Chronicles would be a similar kind of writing, but there's a list here of the different books that could be considered. The Septuagint is the pre-Christian Greek translation of the Old Testament, and it refers to the book as the things omitted, indicating that its translators regarded it as a supplement to Samuel and Kings. Jerome, translator of the Latin Vulgate, suggested that a more appropriate title would be Chronicle of the Whole Sacred History, Luther took over this suggestion as German version, and others have followed him. Chronicles was first divided into 2 books by the Septuagint translators because it's too big for one scroll. Same reason that you have 1st and 2nd Kings and 1st and 2nd Samuel, because it's too much to write on one scroll. It's unmanageable. And so they made it scroll length. So they would cut the book in half. So it's really just one book. According to ancient Jewish tradition, Ezra wrote Chronicles, Ezra, and Nehemiah. But this cannot be established with certainty. It must be acknowledged that the author, if not Ezra himself, at least shared many of the basic concerns. Chronicles may be dated to the later half of the 5th century, possibly in Ezra's lifetime. In his recounting of history in the past, the chronicler relies on many written sources. About half of his work was taken from Samuel and Kings. He also drew on the Pentateuch, Judges, Ruth, Psalms, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentations, and Zechariah. So the idea is, remember, this author is taking from what exists and pulling it together to encourage these post-exile Jews as they come back into the land. He's emphasizing pieces that they need to remember and to do different this time. In addition, the author cites a number of prophetic writings. He cites Samuel the seer, Nathan the prophet, Gad the seer, Ahijah the Shilonite, Iddo the seer, Shemaiah the prophet Isaiah, and the seers. So he refers to a lot of them. Just as the author of Kings had organized and interpreted the data of Israel's history to address the needs of the exiled community, so the chronicler wrote for the restored community. The burning issue was the question of continuity with the past. Is God still interested in us? Are his covenants still in force? Now that we have no Davidic king and are subject to Persia, do God's promises to David still have meaning for us? These questions were the burning questions of the time. What do we do now? How do we go from here? So there are 8 points that the study guide makes about the book. Number 1, its continuity with the past is signified by the temple in Jerusalem. So rebuilding, he goes through a lot of the specifications on the temple, why David, the part that David had in the planning, the part that Solomon had in the building. He really focuses on that because the temple and the temple services are a key part of what God gave the Jews. So when they come back, he's encouraging them to rebuild the temple and to look at what it was and to do that again. The second thing is God's design for the temple and the rituals help the Jewish people to remember they are still God's people. So he's encouraging them to go back to the practices and do the different services and all, because they've been exiled. After 70 years, do you even remember how to do the different practices that are there?
Your 9 Hail Marys or whatever.
Right, or whatever it is.
Right.
The third thing is that the law and the prophets are very important as they return to God. Why is the law important? That's what they broke in the first place. So it's really focused on how the law was acquired and what the contents of the law were. And the prophets, because the prophets are God's voice to the people. The prophets told them, stop, this is going to go bad. Then the prophets told them, it's too late now, it's going to go bad. Make sure you surrender to the guy who comes to get you, right? If they would follow what the prophets had said, it would have been better for them, but they were going to be taken out.
And so if they're what they're saying is there's no continuity to even come together and have one belief system. People are scattered in the last 70 years.
They've gotten mixed up with different religions where
Beliefs
they've been.
and practices and
400 years. I mean, can you imagine? Well, the United States is what, 200 and what?
250 or 270, I can't remember. 276 maybe.
248.
Thank you.
Do we?
Just turned 248.
Do you feel close to the first people who came to the 13 colonies? I wonder what they were, what religious practices. I mean, right? Just to get the idea of time. This
But
time
we'd
is
have
passing.
more continuity if we went back to those 13 colonies and practiced that way.
We might help our country. So this is the same thing they're talking about. Now we come back into the land, and the guy writing Chronicles is trying to say, okay, let's get back. Let's remember who you are and the practices we had, and let's get back to that temple. Let's get back to the things that we are supposed to be doing. The chronicler says in 2 Chronicles 20:20, have faith in the Lord your God and you will be upheld. Have faith in his prophets and you will be successful. So the prophets are giving the current word of God. They're the ones issuing those warnings. All the things they said came true. And so that's what he's saying. We've got to listen to the prophets. So the law and the prophets, like the temple, are more crucial to Israel's continuing relationship with the Lord than the presence or absence of a king. The reigns of the Davidic kings themselves being testimony. So that's what the chronicler is emphasizing, that the practices at the temple and the practices of worship are more important than the king, what happens with the king. Mm-hmm. Can you see how they got that topsy-turvy, where the king became what was most important? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The fourth part is that there are immediate consequences to disobedience to the law and the prophets. So they had all these prophecies saying thus and so is going to happen, and it happened. And so the chronicler really emphasizes that there are going to be immediate consequences for disobedience. And there's a real focus on the hope in the Messiah, in the promised Messiah, the coming of the Messiah. There's a real emphasis throughout the 1st and 2nd Chronicles about the prophesied Messiah that's coming. So the Messiah is yet to come, so that's another reason to hang in there, because the Messiah is yet to come. Which we do that now, aren't we? We see the world going to hell in a handbasket, and what do we say? The time is going to come.
Yeah.
The time is going to come when things will change, and we're holding on to that. Yes.
You know, there's over 100 prophecies that Christ is coming soon.
Amen. So let it be.
Amen.
The sixth point, is that there's a concern about Israel, all Israel. In other words, not whether you were from Judah, whether you're from the north or the south, but the pulling together of a restored Israel, where Israel is all together, one country, not a divided country. And they've gotten so mixed up in their families. I mean, some of them won't even know what tribe they're from, because they've been dispersed and integrated into all these other foreign areas. So they won't know, that'll be very difficult to sort out. So the idea is to make sure, in the chronicler, he really emphasizes we're not Judah and Israel. We're Israel. It's all Israel. It's all one together. So there's that focus. Okay, now, the genealogies are so boring. You need to get some sleep. Try reading the genealogies from chapter 1 to 9. And good luck pronouncing those names. Luckily, there's nobody to tell you you're wrong. So you can just... And it starts, look at 1:1. Look at 1 Chronicles 1:1. Where does it start? Adam, for Pete's sake. They don't even start later, after the flood.
Yeah.
But they get to the flood by verse 4. So you can see they get... So, but it's 9 pages of the genealogy. Why? So I'm going to answer that question by showing you something. Anybody recognize these people?
Mm-hmm.
This is my family.
Mm-hmm.
So this is me and my husband. And then my oldest son is Keith over there.
Mm-hmm.
My next oldest is Aaron. And then Heather is my daughter. And then the others are their spouses and the grandkids. So that's my immediate family. Do we feel connected to the past?
Not
What
as much as we
happens
used to.
when we find out or know or remember the people of the past? It's like we feel connected or inspired or warned by what we see, saw, or heard in their lives. It's like their lessons become our lessons. This is a picture of my immediate family. Here's a picture of what used to be my immediate family. So there's my mom. My dad is taking the picture. Can you guess the year? Somewhere around 78, I would guess. 77, 78. Do we look like we're dressed like 77, 1977? No, it must have been 67, late 60s.
I love those knee socks. I mean, I just...
Oh, yeah. Okay, so my mom is on the left, and then me, and then my sisters, and my dad is taking the picture. My mom was a registered nurse. She went to college while we were in grade school and started working full-time as a nurse during our growing up years. In fact, my first job was working as a nurse's aide at the hospital she was at 14. We were allowed to work at 14, and they paid me to work and be a nurse's aide. Of course, my mom was the nursing supervisor, so maybe she had some influence. But,
Some pull.
and that day you could do that. And that dress right there, I made in my home economics class in 8th grade. Cheryl is next to me. That's my youngest sister. She did gymnastics, and later she became a business accountant and managed her and her husband's orthodontist business. Kristen is next to her. She was a teacher and currently homeschools her grandchildren. And Kathy, on the far side, she taught 3rd grade in Southern California and just retired this past month, same time I did. She retired from education. This is my husband's mom and dad, and my kids. So Tom and Edith. He was a high school PE teacher and a coach, and she worked for a department store. Keith turned out to be an electrician apprentice. Next to him is Heather. She owns her own business and is a certified sign language interpreter. And Aaron, who's sitting on Edith's lap, is an electrical mechanical engineer. I could never have imagined when they were that age the things they would do and become, right? It's just the way that it happens. How about these guys? Woohoo! This is way back now. You can tell by the yellow tinge of the picture. See, on the right there is a picture of my mom. She's on the left side. Her brothers and sisters, her dad, and in front that's her family, her brothers and sisters and her mom. On the left, see the 2 older people right in the very front? Those are my great-grandparents. Those are my grandmother's parents. Their last name was Rothplatz. They were Hans Max Rothplatz, and I don't remember her first name. And those people I never met or knew. I've just seen them by picture. And the first time I really came to know them was when we had some visitors from Switzerland come to our family reunion. They were my grandmother's sisters. And I said, Grandma, I didn't know you had sisters. She said, yes, these are my sisters from Switzerland. So come to find out that this couple here, they were a part of a big family of Rothplatz family. This is a Rothplatz family tree starting from 1415.
Wow.
From 1415, and it shows the generations and all the people. And then this was added to it. This goes down to the 17th generation. And I couldn't find them on here. I have found it before, but somewhere there's a note. I keep thinking it's on the right side. There's a note that says, Hans Max Rothplatz, farmer in America, and then nothing. Nothing. So we said, well, where's the rest of the tree? So my son Aaron, he made the rest of the tree.
Wow.
He got some software and then we started recording our own family tree to show what happened with Hans Max Rothplatz. His wife's name was Bertha Schneeberger. And this says that they lived till 1964, and 1959, 1964 was the length of their life. And then these are all the generations, and I'm right here somewhere. I saw me earlier, somewhere here. That's the Bullocks, Rivers. Here I am right here. This is me and my family. So the generations then, we were kind of a little bit out of shape. We asked why did it end that way? And we had our own family tree with a list of our generations that we had made, and this is it. And every year when we meet, we would add generations to it. And then that was when we found out that we connected to this whole history when those 2 sisters came. So I asked my grandma. Nobody asked my grandma the important questions except for me. My mom didn't know either. Some things I find out, and then all of a sudden the room gets really quiet because they're all listening because they've not ever been brave enough to ask. I don't know why my grandma Brody always let me ask her the awkward questions. And I said, well, Grandma, how come you have these 2 sisters? Why haven't they been here in Buckeye or whatever? I thought, I don't understand. And she said that when she was young, a baby, and her sisters were just older than her, they had moved, they were farming in somewhere on the East Coast, and it was, he had purchased bad land. It was farmed out land because he didn't know what he was doing. He thought he could just buy any land and farm on it. He actually had education in farming that he got in Switzerland, but Switzerland's not a farm place. And so when he came to America, he just didn't do well, and he lost his money on a bad piece of land. So they moved then to downtown Phoenix area where there was cheaper land, and he began farming there. And they had the 3 girls, and then some sort of illness was going around the Phoenix area, and children were dying from this illness. And so they had only enough money to send the 2. So they sent the 2 older girls back to Switzerland, and they could never afford to have
Bring
them
them
come
back.
back. And so they stayed with the family in Switzerland. And so as they got older, then they began to communicate and kind of get back together. So my grandfather, or great whatever great grandfather, had a college education in Switzerland. So we started talking to some of the family members in Switzerland that still existed. These 2 sisters started. We had a few people, cousins who came to visit, you know. We started asking questions and getting connected. Come to find out, we have a whole bunch of family in Switzerland. Not tons, but we have this whole line of family. They're the Rothplatz family, and they are known for their architectural and engineering work that they've done in Switzerland. So they took us on a tour and showed us, like we went down under the city, and they showed us the pipes and all that had their Rothplatz on it, and you know, showed how they were responsible for several of the infrastructure there. And this is our castle. We didn't know we had a castle. It's actually a tower. This part right here is the tower. Here's another picture of it here. This part is the tower where they lived, and this was added later, this house part here. But that tower was the original house, and there in cities there, they would often start a city by setting towers on the fence line, and then those towers would be part of the protection of the city. They would build walls then between tower to tower, and that would encapsulate the city. So our family that was our tower, our house. And they had invited us to come over because they built a museum. This is the edge of the museum, and that's the museum opening. And they built a museum adjacent to the house and the tower so that it had artifacts from our family and other families from Arar, from all different families from the area. So we had things in that museum that belonged to us. So these 2 people, I have no idea who they are, but I do know we have several people named Frida, so maybe it's after this lady. And the name of the other guy is Christian Emil. They're both Rothplatzes. So that was kind of what, you know, wow, that's kind of cool. And there were other family member pictures, but most of them we didn't know. And Frida died when I was 1 year old, so they were much older than I was. This is a room that had artifacts in it. These are the artifacts. And one of the stories I've told before in class is that we have a chest that had gold coins in it, and the generations, I forget what generation started it, and every generation as they were able would add gold coins to this chest, and they used it to pay for scholarships for kids to go to college. And Aaron actually applied, and they did help him with his engineering degree from U of A. Not very much, but still it was a token amount to help him go to college. But that's what the chest was for. That chest is right there. It has our family seal. Around the area, everybody has family seals and signs and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, this lady I've told you about before. They told us when we were there that this lady had, I think it was 50 years, she had a Bible study every week in the tower. Oops, that people could come to the Bible study every week in the tower. And I just was so impressed by that. I thought, yeah, right. Especially because it was a woman. And she, you know, so I don't know, I just kind of got a kick out of it. It was encouraging to me when I was going to Bible college to see if somebody was teaching Bible way back in the day. So why do I share this with you? The reason I know these things, and there's more, is because the same reason that the chronicler tells us this. When I review what's happened from the people in my past, it pushes me to go further. It inspires me to keep going. It helps me set expectations, and it warns me about potential pitfalls. I can learn from the examples that are there, right? But who did I not show you? Well, I didn't show you the picture that my grandma MacMinn showed me. My grandma MacMinn would be my dad's mom. And we were at her little farmhouse in Arkansas. I stayed with her one summer, and I saw this picture on the wall. I'll never forget the picture. I can visualize it, but I don't know where it is now or whatever happened to it. I was in high school when I saw it. It was a picture of a shack, like a one room. In the farmhouses out there, you would see old barns and old shacks where the wood was big gaps in the wood and stuff. I think of it like today when you see pictures that the Negro farm laborers were living in, kind of like that, like a one shack, one room house, and with air going between. You could see between the wood, old wood, and kind of slanted. And in front of it was, I think there were 3 young boys, like little boys, like 2, 3, 4 years old, and then a little girl who was probably 9 or 10, and then there were 2 other girls that were a little older, maybe teen years, and then a mother that was at the end, and they were standing in a row just like this with their sackcloth clothing. It looked like it made out of like potato sacks or something. No shoes, and scraggly hair, scruffy and dirty. It was just a black and white, old faded picture, but that's what it looked like. And I saw that picture and I asked my grandma about it. And she said that she was responsible for taking care of the boys, those young boys, while her older sister and her mother went into town and worked. They would do any kind of odd job, sewing, cleaning, whatever they could to get money. And they would make, the 3 of the girls working could make just enough for them to barely survive. And it was her job to take care of the boys. I decided that's why she was so bossy. But at 18, when she turned 18, she said, I've had enough of this. I'm not doing this anymore. The boys are old enough to take care of themselves. I'm leaving. And so she left for Phoenix. And in Phoenix, she found, there was also the Depression. When she left, it was the time of the Depression. When she got to Phoenix, she found work in a lunch meat packaging company in Phoenix. And that's where she met my grandfather, who also had left Texas instead of Arkansas. She was from Arkansas, he came from Texas, but it was during the Depression. There wasn't work to be had. So he came to Phoenix also to the same company to work, to be able to work. And that's where they met, and that's where they got married. Now, where is Dad in that situation? I said, well, where's the father? Who was your mom married to? He's got all these kids. And that was when she said, we really don't know very much about my father. She said, we think that he was at least part Indian, and he was a drunk. He was the town drunk. So a lot of times he would just sleep on the street, laying in the curb of the street. He would be so drunk. And she said, my mom wouldn't allow him to come to the house. I was told that if he ever came to the house, I was supposed to run out with the kids. She was supposed to not let him anywhere near them. So who knows what that is all about. But his name was MacMinn. And there are a whole line of MacMinnvilles along the north part of the U.S. going toward California. I'm thinking, I wonder if he came from there. But anyway, those are all rumors, because even my cousins, I talked with them recently, and they kind of did a search to try to find out more. We do think that he was at least partly Native American, but we just don't know anything about him. And even when we've looked at, well, why is your name of your town MacMinnville? And nobody seems to have an answer, so we don't know.
Isn't that
We don't
funny?
know the connection.
I was home for a funeral, and we were at the cemetery, and so I went to my grandparents' graves, and my grandma was 89, I think, and I was 6 when she passed away. So, but my grandfather's right next to her, and so we're saying, well, are there any plots available, and blah, 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 and we went in to get the history, and he's not there, but his headstone is there. But she said, this grave is empty. It has always been empty. I'm like, what'd they do with them?
I know.
So
There are a
it's
lot
like
of
history
mysteries.
has its secrets. And
Yeah. And I was notorious for asking the questions with my grandparents, because they would answer me. And I don't know why my mom they seemed like they weren't supposed to ask those questions. So
They were
like,
very private back
Yeah.
then, though.
so when I would
Certainly
ask,
with their
my grandma
business.
would, share with me. I was a kid,
Uh-huh.
and I would ask. And I remember one time in the car, we were driving, and I said, Grandma, I don't understand. I know that you have 2 kids from a different than Grandpa Brody. So where did those 2, Albert and Eddie, how did they come about? And then all of a sudden the car got like super quiet.
Right, you didn't
Like-
have the nerve to just ask
Like I
that,
had
did
the
you?
chills, goosebumps, whatever. My mom was driving. My Aunt Joanne was in the back seat, and I was sitting beside my Aunt Joanne. My grandma was in the front seat, and it got silent. And then my grandma Brody said, "Well, you see," and she told me this story that was just so incredible. And I found out later that my mom and my aunt had never asked and never knew anything about that story. But she had basically run away from home with this young boy, and the father said, if you go, then you're not coming back. Don't plan to come back. If you go, you shouldn't go. He's not good. He just doesn't have a job, whatever. But they left, and they went somewhere like, I don't know if it was Oklahoma or Texas, and he would go to work, and she would stay at the place they had to live. And he would go to work and come back, and she never knew where he worked. He just would go to work every day and come back and bring the money. And she says usually we had enough money to buy some bologna and some milk, and and she would just stay at this little shack house thing, and that's the way she described it. Well, she got pregnant, and then they didn't know how to deliver a baby. They couldn't afford a doctor, so she said it was very scary, but we delivered the baby ourselves. And then we were really worried because his hands were turned in like an awkward way. It seemed like he had like something. I was worried that we had messed him up, when by not knowing what we were doing. I mean, she just described the situation. And one day, I'm not giving you all the details, but she said one day she was pregnant with her second child, and she had this young baby, and her husband just didn't come home. And she didn't know what happened to him. He just didn't come home. He didn't come home the next day or the next day. Pretty soon there was no more bologna and there was no more milk, and she didn't know, what to do. So she wired her father and got a telegraph message to her father. And he sent her, he didn't reply, but he sent her the tickets, a ticket for her and a ticket for the child, a one-way ticket home. And she said she went home, and he never asked her. They never talked about it, nothing. She had the second child. The second child had the same kind of deformities as the first. And anyway, this whole story was something she had never told before, even to her own children. But, why are these stories important? Why are they important to me?
Because they're historical, they're chronological, they're your history, they're your DNA.
It's like you feel kind of inspired by what
They went through.
what they went through, to do better, or to at least be as strong or as imaginative or creative or whatever. It's inspiring to you, and that's why the First Chronicles spends 9 chapters reminding these people who they're related to, who their family is, and reminding them of what they did and where they were and where they came from, because he's going to encourage them to continue in those traditions, to go back to some of those traditions. So the 8 points that we have: the temple and the temple service is still a key part of God that God gave the Jews through David and Solomon. God designs for the temple and rituals help the Jewish people remember they are still God's people. The law and the prophets are very important as they return to God. There are immediate consequences to disobedience to the law and the prophets. The Messiah is still to come. There will be a restored Israel. The genealogies connect the existing returning people to the past. And then the 8th part is that to let you know that several of the speeches in Chronicles are found in Samuel and Kings. There are 165 speeches of different lengths in Chronicles. 95 are found in parallel text, just so that you know. Okay, so if we take a look at 1 Chronicles 8, take a look at 1 Chronicles 1 through 8, kind of flip through it, you'll see a list of who begot who. And then now in chapter 9, verse 1, it says, All Israel was listed in the genealogies recorded in the book of the kings of Israel and Judah. They were taken captive to Babylon because of their unfaithfulness. Then a list of those who first settled back and the genealogy of Saul. So next week we will start in 1 Chronicles 10. We won't get to our first prophet, which is Obadiah, probably till the middle of 2 Chronicles. But I'll give you a heads up because I know some of you like to read ahead. So I'll make sure and give you a heads up. So we're going to start in 1 Chronicles chapter 10 is where we're going to start next week. And probably Obadiah, he doesn't come for quite a while. So Obadiah will probably be the first one that we do. Elijah and Elisha were prophets of the time, but they didn't write. They just spoke. And so we're looking at the prophets that we have scriptures from. So what do you think? Think we could learn something from this?
Always.
Oh, yeah.
I think we can.
Always, always.
Okay, let's pray. Father, I thank you so much for giving us all of this history that we can learn from. And I pray, Lord, that we might be inspired, like the people of that time, to follow you and to do what you've told us to do, that we know that that will work out to our best interests. And I pray that we might be sensitive to the messages of the prophets and the seers who tell us about Christ coming and what it's going to be like and what we can expect. And I pray, Lord, that we will respond to your direction and to your guidance and learn the lessons that these people had to learn as they come back from exile. Thank you for teaching us this thing. I pray, Lord, that you will be with Charles and Joan and with Joan's mom and sister, that you'll give them wisdom on how to support and encourage them. I pray that you'll help them through this difficult time. It's in Jesus' name that we pray. Amen.